Now this could easily be a false dawn, but Yuki Tsunoda is basically doing exactly what he did last year, and just getting on with the job whilst eclipsing his teammate. Sorry, but it's true. Look at the results. What made me decide to make this video, aside from the multiple comments from my last video asking why I hadn't done one yet, was that Yuki Tsunoda had seemingly turned a corner and become a much more complete driver and finally started to get over his infamous temper, making the team that has nurtured him since 2021 all the more proud and showing me clear signs that they are backing him 100% and that his short-term future in Formula 1 might be enough to be able to get him a place at another team or at the top team. Now in his 4th season, Yuki is pretty much aware that his time as a junior driver has now passed him. Unless you're Dr. Marco, of course, who still regards Yuki Tsunoda as a junior driver, or should I say referred to him as such, because right now, according to the doctor, Yuki has now blossomed. You get it? Because we were at the Japanese Grand Prix and cherry blossoms. The Austrian is now a comedian! But there's nothing funny regarding Yuki's performances. In fact, when you compare them to what he was doing last year, and what his teammate last year was doing, and what his teammate this year is doing, there's a lot of overlapping, and that is really telling for the future of Daniel Ricciardo. I will keep the discourse regarding Daniel to a minimum. We are talking about Yuki here, and how he is becoming, by the race, a much more dependable driver. Having secured the first point from a Japanese driver at Suzuka since Kamui Kobayashi in 2012, the video of him on the podium has stuck with me to this day. Go and watch the race archive of that race, and the podium, it's so mesmerizing. The Japanese crowd chanting, "Kamui, Kamui!" It's so primal, it's mesmerizing, it's fascinating. I've never seen a podium that ethereal. And you might be thinking, well, it was a measly point, why get excited about it? But need I remind you about the importance of these points for any team south of Aston Martin? So far, Yuki is leading the lower division of F1, having garnered all 7 points that Racing Bulls currently possesses. And also, if you look at the driver's standings, it's all the more impressive. He's only 2 points, Yuki, behind Lance Stroll, and only 3 points behind Lewis Hamilton. And the next person below him is an 18-year-old temp from Essex. In terms of securing prize money and an early advantage for Team Faenza, Yuki Tsunoda is doing the business, much like he was doing in 2023, when the AT04 was clearly the worst car on the grid. And even then, he was able to get 11th places, the occasional 10th place, and give that team something to smile about. But now, the smiles have got even broader, and now Yuki is feeling a lot more settled as the team leader, doing his old teammate Pierre Gasly proud. But actually, I feel like another driver has been an even bigger influence in terms of his development. A driver that many people have disregarded as a folly, a mismatch for Formula 1. A bad example of helmet magpie picking the wrong driver from the wrong team. And that is, of course, the likes of Nick de Vries. Now, you might be thinking, really? Nick de Vries? Why are you giving him any credit? Well, need I remind you, he is a champion of Formula E, and he does know how to set up a car. And yes, I'm aware he only survived 10 races in Formula 1, but hear me out. Tsunoda has always been respectful in regards to his Dutch teammate, and even compared him to Niki Lauda of all people. Wait a minute, are you serious? Oh yeah, I'm very serious, alright. Yuki said it, not me. According to him, De Vries was a natural in providing feedback in a particular session, being able to read the car very meticulously and provide crucial information for all of the engineers to try and update the car, fix some problems, and get the best setup possible. Going down to incredibly minute details that Yuki Tsunoda found fascinating and something that he continues to respect to this day. It makes Nick de Vries an incredibly valuable asset, and it just makes it a crying shame that he wasn't at the likes of Williams. Had he been there alongside Alex Albon for 2023, he might have been able to provide so much information to work alongside Alex Albon, Williams might have scored even more points. I know that you're going to say, oh, the AT04 was absolutely terrible, it was the slowest car on the grid. Well, that wasn't Nick de Vries' fault, he didn't develop the car initially, and in fact, as he was providing more and more feedback and the engineers were taking it on board, we slowly saw the AT04 improve, and by the time we got to the end of the season, probably thanks to the likes of De Vries' initial feedback from the initial chassis and initial specs, we actually saw the AlphaTauri near the Williams, which is a huge improvement considering that they were right at the bottom to begin with. And it peaked with Daniel Ricciardo getting 4th place on the grid at Mexico. And Tsunoda has continued this rhetoric, mentioning all the time that he will never forget Nick de Vries and how much he was able to contribute to the team when it was pretty much their darkest hour. And there was a really cute scene where at the Tokyo E-Prix, Yuki Tsunoda was obviously hanging out and he met up with Nick de Vries, they embraced, they looked like they were really happy to see each other. I'm pretty sure they still keep in touch, and maybe they're good friends, who knows, but you really feel like the time that they had together, even though it was short, it was a really productive time of it, and probably something that really will be something that Yuki Tsunoda embraces, like that hug, and also take on board with him for the future. Even though de Vries is gone from the Formula One grid, a part of him is still there, a certain force, providing comfort for the likes of Yuki Skywalker. Use the G-Force, Yuki. And it will also contribute to Yuki Tsunoda being considered for the Red Bull seat in 2025. In the eyes of Christian Horner, that seat is Checo's seat to lose, rather than it being a dead cert for Daniel Ricciardo these days, but Yuki is at least entering his peripheral vision. Speaking of, okay, I wasn't making this video to bash Daniel Ricciardo. I am going to provide you the facts and information, the parallels from last year that I have managed to see whilst making this video, and just say that realistically, things are not all that different. And also, when you take into consideration all of the hype surrounding Daniel before the Hungarian Grand Prix, fresh off the back of the Pirelli tyre tests where supposedly he was pumping in times in the RB19 that weren't far off Max Verstappen, everyone was expecting him to just come in with his big bright smile and completely crush Yuki, ensuring that those 2 points that Yuki had gotten AlphaTauri to prevent them from getting a duck would be completely forgotten. But most of that hype failed to materialize, and I still reiterate that Daniel is cursing himself for what happened at Zandvoort. Because people were expecting Daniel to get consistent P11s, P10s, and maybe the occasional 9th place, getting consistent points finishes and slowly building up the momentum for AlphaTauri to climb the ladder, and then maybe try and mount a campaign against Williams. But when you get to the end of the season, Abu Dhabi 2023, save for his pretty convincing 7th place at Mexico, Daniel only scored then 1 time. After Hungary, Yuki scored a total of 4 times. But to play devil's advocate, Yuki could have made that 5 times that he would have scored had he not had a coming together with Oscar Piastri, which I will admit was quite immature and quite desperate. It did prevent AlphaTauri getting a double points finish, so that was a snafu on his part. The momentum from 2023 has continued, with Tsunoda being the only Racing Bull driver to have gotten into Q3, whilst Ricciardo has gotten closer and closer, showing signs of improvement. The incident with Albon put pay to any chance of him being able to capitalise on that and get some points for himself, and thusly manifesting a statistic that he shares with Nick de Vries, that both drivers DNF'd at the 4th race of the season. But it gets weirder. On average, de Vries finished in an average 14.3th, and Ricciardo has finished on average around about 13.7th. You look at that, and that's not all that much different. Maybe 0.6%. 1 place on the grid on average in 3 races. And it just gets all the more galling when the AT04 at the beginning of the season was the worst car, and the Racing Bulls right now is definitely not the worst car. It's probably around about the 6th or 7th fastest or something like that. Points are available to it, but they're not always a guarantee. But that's certainly a lot better than what AlphaTauri could have expected last year. The disparity in machinery is probably why Helmut Marko is getting all the more concerned and is turning up the wick in regards to putting pressure on Daniel Ricciardo. And also getting a lot of pressure from Liam Lawson, who he promised himself that he was going to be racing with them in 2025. If they don't fulfill that promise, then he could easily walk, because Liam Lawson is destined to be in Formula One. It's quite obvious. And whoever was in charge of direction and having their cameras pointed at Daniel Ricciardo with Liam Lawson right behind him, but at the same time, there are still people who think Yuki Tsunoda doesn't deserve to be in Formula One and should be axed immediately. I don't see that. This year, in particular, has been wondrous for Yuki. This has exactly been the turning point that he has needed. We all thought it happened in 2023, but he still showed signs of immaturity and, of course, his infamous temper tantrums. But now, it's slowly started to become a lot more of a content and solid baseline. And the work that he's done right now has established a majorly important foothold in cementing 6th place for them. There has been a watershed moment, in my opinion, and it really came to light when he was doing an interview with Ted Kravitz for Sky Sports, and he realised that Bahrain was a bit of a wake-up call. He had a coming together with Daniel Ricciardo on the cooldown lap after team orders meant that Daniel and he swapped places, even though Yuki saw no reason for that to happen. I mean, okay, you could easily justify it because Daniel Ricciardo was on softer tyres and therefore there might have been a chance to go for 11th place. But at the same time, it was also just a bit unnecessary because it was right at the end, like 3 or so laps before the checkered flag. There wouldn't have been enough time to be able to mount a campaign, or at least get the overtake done because, you know, Formula 1, overtaking without DRS, definitely impossible, am I right? But you just get the feeling that Yuki felt hard done by. I'm not justifying it. What he did was dangerous because it's a Formula 1 car. It's a weapon. 200 miles an hour, even 100 miles an hour. You colliding with your teammate, not only is it a major cardinal sin, but it's also incredibly responsible. Yes, I'm advocating for Yuki Tsunoda in this video, but I'm still not justifying that behavior. That was bad. And I think he's now started to own it. And when it comes to growing as a person, owning said behavior is incredibly crucial to becoming a better person at the end of it. And also, if they had collided, it would have been repeated ad nauseum for the rest of his career. Much like how we remember when Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel collided on the cooldown lap after Sepang one year. But clearly, he's bounced back from it really quickly. And as we saw at the Japanese Grand Prix, this will go down as one of his best races, right up there with Abu Dhabi 2021, where he finished 4th, believe it or not. Yeah, he did finish 4th. He was 1 place behind the podium, and nobody noticed for obvious reasons. And then, of course, the same place this time last year, where at one point he was leading the race, and he was doing the best he can with the strategy that AlphaTauri were trying to pull off to try and bag 7th place in the Constructors. Again, it was Yuki's fault because he crashed out with Piastri, and thusly that meant that 7th place eluded them. But the fact they were even contention was a major tour de force after what they started off with. Yes, this is all very well and good. Yuki Tsunoda's doing really well. This is coming from a professional yapper who seems to be living his days on a ladder. But you're also hearing this from people that he works closely with. You hear this from the likes of Laura Mekis, the new team principal. You're hearing this from the engineers that work closely with Yuki. Some of them have been working with Yuki since he entered Formula 1 3 years ago. They recognised how Tsunoda has stepped up this year and how gathering valuable points in the midfield battle very early on is a clear indicator that Tsunoda is doing everything possible to convince the Red Bull group to at the very least keep him on board for 2025. And of course, this being the final season that they have partnered up with Honda to some capacity before the Red Bull-Ford partnership comes online next year. And then of course Honda moves over to working with Aston Martin exclusively. And many people assume that Yuki Tsunoda will just jump ship because, hey, he's a Honda driver. But Honda have made it clear that they are not going to be directly influencing whoever Aston Martin pick to be the second driver alongside Fernando Alonso. Depending, of course, whether or not he chooses to remain in Formula 1, of course. And what also got me convinced as to why Yuki Tsunoda has really matured since that Bahrain blow-up is what he said regarding the pit stop. You know the one. That pit stop, where there were 5 drivers coming into the pits at the same time, Yuki Tsunoda was behind 3 of them. And because of what they were able to do, that pit crew, that magic, the complete opposite of what Sauber are able to do right now, he was able to rise up the ranks and get past all of them, and that secured him, as he said, that 10th place. He couldn't have done it without his crew. And immediately he got on the radio, thanking them for their hard work, saying they were like supermen. And then at the end of it all, he thanked them again on social media. He was thanking them more. He was really making it clear that this was not a solo effort. He didn't say, look at me, I did all of that. It was all my work about how I was so great. He did his team proud. The team did proud of themselves, and that means that that unit is going to get all the more closer. And as many important drivers have said over the years, that building a rapport with your side of the garage is incredibly important. They'll have your back. They will make sure that your car is ready to go in record time. They will go the extra mile to make sure that everything that you touch in that car will be working perfectly. The transformation in Tsunoda seems really apparent this season because there is a lot running on this season. Many people thinking that this will be his last season in Formula 1, much like how everyone thought that last year would be Yuki Tsunoda's last season in Formula 1, and how the year before that everyone thought that that would be the last season for Yuki Tsunoda in Formula 1. Can you see this as a continuing pattern? It's almost mirroring Lance Stroll in a way. Everyone thinking, oh, this is his last year in Formula 1. Yuki Tsunoda ain't a Lance Stroll. In fact, I think it's actually going the other way because Lance Stroll's temper is actually getting worse and Yuki's is getting better, so there's going to be a natural crossing over point. Convergence. And also, he's had the best experience in terms of a teammate. Pierre for his leadership skills and general understanding of a team dynamic, and Nick for his ability to read a car and understand where it needs to be improved. That combination is incredibly mighty when convincing a midfield team to employ you. A driver who can lead a team into battle with plenty of optimism and spirit, whilst also being able to provide important feedback for the engineers to work on and therefore optimize the car, considering that the initial base car is not going to be the fastest on the grid. You need to extract every single millisecond that you can out of that machine, much like how Nico Hülkenberg is able to do at Haas. And it's also why we value the likes of Alex Albon when he is not destroying chassis, because apparently he's now broken the chassis that Logan Sargent gave him. Are you freaking kidding me? I mean, I like Alex Albon and the contributions he's provided to Williams have been incredibly valuable, but come on. Okay, I now am getting the feeling that Yuki Tsunoda is becoming more and more a dependable driver, which a midfield team will find immensely valuable, right up there with the likes of Alex Albon and Nico Hülkenberg. And also at the same time, he is pitching a case to try his luck against Max Verstappen in 2025. In my predictions video for 2025, right before Lewis Hamilton completely eviscerated it, thank you Lewis, I predicted that Yuki Tsunoda would be the partner of Max Verstappen next year. And I still stand by it to some extent, but at the same time, I am rooting for Checo to be able to prove everybody wrong. His mindset absolutely perfect for the season, taking every single win that he can, and if he's pretty close to Max Verstappen, then great, he's had a good weekend. He's been able to make waves with the likes of Christian Horner, who for the longest time seemed to be absolutely besotted with Daniel Ricciardo and almost guaranteeing him that that would be his seat to lose, but now apparently it's Checo's seat to lose. The turnaround in just a few short races has been remarkable, convincing Christian to not give Daniel the seat. Whoa! And conversely, if Yuki is able to drag the Racing Bulls car to either the strong 6th place in the standings or get onto the coattails of Aston Martin, or even just outscoring Lance Stroll, then he'll start to get the higher-ups at Red Bull twitching a little bit, considering their options. Let's just say that the discussion about who's going to be partnering Max Verstappen next year has gotten a lot more complicated than it was just a few short months ago. It's no longer a shoey for Daniel Ricciardo, and quite frankly, he's going to be lucky to be able to survive at Racing Bulls for another year at the rate he's going. And another thing that's making me think that Daniel Ricciardo's not really got a good chance of getting back at Red Bull is the mindset that he has at being at AlphaTauri and Racing Bulls to begin with. He sees it as a means to an end, to get to the top tier. He's not really thinking in the here and now and providing an important bedrock for a team to try and get 6th place in the Constructors. He is seeing this as a facilitator. He sees it as a temporary stopping off point, as in a, thanks fellas, but I'm off now, bye. Whereas Yuki Tsunoda is really thinking of this as his home, because it is his home. They have watched him grow, they have seen him mature, and they couldn't be any more proud of him. Sure, he's had his outbursts. Yes, they were cute to begin with, but they grew increasingly tiresome, to the point where we were all thinking, yeah, okay, Yuki, it's getting old now. But now those are slowly becoming rarer and rarer, and Bahrain was incredibly important. That lashing out, that was a point where he had to go, right, okay, I can't let this get the better of me. I need to provide the results that will get me a place for next year. And so far, he's doing it. Q3 appearances, a lot of the time. He's getting all of the points. He got a 7th place at Melbourne, fantastic. And now he got another point at Suzuka. Yes, I know a point doesn't really sound all that great, but considering that the top 5 teams did not have a DNF this time around, that's all the more impressive. They were able to get past Lance Stroll. And I get the feeling that that's going to become a trend if Lance Stroll keeps this up, that he's going to be the only one of the top 5 drivers not securing a point, or maybe just getting a 12th or something like that. And then some of the other teams are able to capitalize on that, get a good pit stop strategy, which in the case of Yuki Tsunoda this time out he did, and therefore bag a 10th place. And then just increasingly accrue these points to the point where they can then cement 6th place and think, okay, that's good. We have now got plenty of points, because right now, thanks to Yuki, and no thanks to Daniel, they have now got an extra $20 million in their pocket over last year. This level of camaraderie between Yuki and his side of the garage could be very important later on in the year. Yes, of course, Daniel Ricciardo probably might have been able to have a chance for scoring points himself, but thanks to Alex Albon, we did not get to see that. And of course, we've got to remember the old adage of, you're only as good as your last race. So yes, I feel like Yuki Tsunoda has got what it takes to stay in Formula 1 for just that little bit longer, to then be in charge of his own destiny. Something that Pierre Gasly was able to do when he went over to Alpine for 2023. He can then decide where he wants to go, whether it's remaining at Racing Bulls, going to another team completely, or getting the chance to go up to Red Bull and try his mettle against Max Verstappen. The results speak for themselves. Last year, everyone expected him to completely be trounced by Daniel. That didn't happen. He and Liam were level pegging, and that's what we want to see. We want to see Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson at a similar skill level, going at it and providing as many points for Racing Bulls as possible. That would be really, really good. You just get the feeling that the patience for Daniel Ricciardo considering that he's not really able to do the business against Yuki, is wearing thin. Yeah, I know, I'm not trying to bash Daniel, but again, you got to look at the facts and the averages, and it's there to see. And even if he doesn't get the plum at Red Bull and he goes over to Aston Martin, this might be enough for at least Sergio Perez to end his time in Formula 1 with Red Bull and thusly be paraded around in Red Bull colours for the rest of his life. Sort of similar to what's happening with David Coulthard, because he retired with Red Bull and he's doing all sorts of publicity events for them. And keeping Checo on your payroll will be very, very good in retaining a lot of Mexican fans, just saying. But what would be even nicer to see is Yuki Tsunoda grow even more as a driver and get his chance to race with Red Bull, if not in 2025, but for 2026 with a brand new car, thusly establishing himself against Max Verstappen and possibly becoming the most successful Japanese driver in Formula 1 history. That is certainly achievable. We have never seen a Japanese driver win a Grand Prix. They've been on the podium a few times, but never the top step. That could easily happen if Red Bull have a really good car in 2026. We're all rooting for you, Yuki, so good luck. Or alternatively, we might see Liam Lawson play an absolute blinder and he might get the chance to go up against Max Verstappen, because quite clearly, he is putting on a lot of pressure and the cameras and the media are seeing this completely play out. And it's something that I talked about in a video that you can go and watch right now here about why Lawson is providing many warnings to Red Bull in terms of getting on with the business.